bang! 6'3". Get that crap out of here. Because if you don't know, now you know. What up, peeps? Exposure time. Freaking Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. You kidding me right now? 6'3", peeps. If you don't know, SCOTUS shot it down. OSHA mandate. Dunskies. Sorry, Biden. Go back to the drawing board on your tyrannical measures. The stinking Supreme Court is probably just, not the Supreme Court, the Founding Fathers are probably just saying, finally, finally. Hey, Coley. Hey, Sarah. What's going down? Oh, my goodness. All right. We got a lot to talk about. Hi, everybody. I know I'm back. It's been a while. Yes, that's what I'm talking about, Mary. Yes! Finally, the freaking Constitution means something. We got to take these little victories, right? I know people are going to say, I actually heard a great comment by Bahizzi. He said, any Republican that tells you that they helped kill the vaccine mandates and didn't do anything for other parts of past transgressions, we'll say, from 2020, I don't know, maybe 2021, 2020, who knows, is lying to you. So don't listen to them. They'll take their victory laps, but this is a humongous win for the Constitution. So in this broadcast, I'm going to kind of read through the concurrence and the dissents. It's going to get kind of mundane, but I want you guys to get the perspective of this. There's a lot of kind of clips being taken out and highlighted by other people. So, if you want to fast forward to the next part in this, I don't know what the timestamp on that'll be, but I'm going to read through these, the concurrence. Hey, Henry, how you doing, man? I know, Mary, that's what I'm saying. Finally, that's what I'm saying. Oh, it's good to be back here too, K-Skull. Thanks, man. So I'm going to read through them because I want you to get kind of the full context of what Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito, ACB, Thomas, and am I leaving anybody out? No. One more. I'm leaving somebody out. I can't remember. Oh, the guy, Bush appointee. I can't remember his name right now. The one that never sides with anything constitutionally, unless it's something he probably feels like he's got to be doxxed on. Why can't I think of his name? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to read through them and give you guys some context. So if you got some time, like if you're in the car driving home from work, or if you're on a break or something, you want to listen to what they were saying, I'm going to read through that with you. And then I'll read the dissents as well, because they're ridiculous. And I will say, yeah, Roberts, thank you, you guys, John Roberts. Then I'm going to read through the, unfortunately, the 5-4 decision. There was only dissenting on that one for the Health and Human Services, federal healthcare workers. They still can be required to have a vaccine mandated to them. It's highly unfortunate that certain justices will not look at the Constitution as it was written and allow states to make their own decisions. But we're going to take the win, and then we're going to kind of lament the loss and push them. And the people, the healthcare workers, you guys have to band together now. Like this is your time to band together. All right. And then there's a lot of other things going on, like the filibuster basically got shot down by Kristen Sinema. I'm going to play her speech for you. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's great to have, again, some context with that. So if you want, you could fast forward and kind of skim through that. And then there's some other things that Biden was talking about today that just blew my mind. I'm like, dude, you are ridiculous. There's this tyranny is in your face. They're not hiding it. They're literally screaming like toddlers when they don't get what they want at a camera. Any camera that's pointed at them, they'll just scream as loud as they can because they feel like if they do that, they're going to dox enough people or make people feel uncomfortable enough to go with what they want the next time. It's absurd. So, hey, Liberty Lion, what's up, buddy? Yeah, I know I'm not on here ever. I know. Quick note on that note, by the way, guys, I miss YouTube so much. I miss it so much. And yeah, I could be on here more. There's a lot of things happening in my personal life, but we are doing a lot of uncensored content over on Locals, locals.com, exposure.locals.com. And I have a hard time splitting time between the two because I don't want to give YouTube lackluster content in just coming on here and talking for 2 minutes and then leaving. because I value you guys' time way more than that. But as most of you know, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and so I really have a hard time finding the time. Like right now, my kids are asleep. It's nap time right now, and so I got X amount of time before they start waking up, and so usually during that time, I'm doing like 2020 news, or I'm doing other news that you can't talk about on here related to health and wellness. And so I'm really sorry about that on YouTube. I love you guys and I miss you a lot, but I just want you to know you are not forgotten, and I will be over here more. I just have to figure out a way I can balance that. Plus, there might be a new job coming into play here. We're working out some of the negotiating details. There's a lot going on, and unfortunately, I haven't been on YouTube as much. But right now, let's get into this, shall we? Gosh, this was so big, guys. So big. So for those who don't know, 6-3 decision. Supreme Court shuts down OSHA's vaccine mandates, and we're going to read through it right here. This is that's the dissent for the Health and Human Services federal workers. We're going to talk about that in a second. All right. So here's the concurrence between Gorsuch, Thomas, and Alito. The central, and again, I'm going to read this straight through. If you want to fast forward this, if you're not wanting to hear the whole thing straight through, but I think it's great for context. And you can find clips all over the internet as well if you just want to read the abridged version. But I wanted to give those who wanted to hear the whole thing a chance to hear it. So here we go. The central question we face today is who decides? Amen for that. No one doubts that the COVID-19 pandemic has posed challenges for every American, or that our state, local, and national governments all have roles to play in combating the disease. The only question is whether an administrative agency in Washington, one charged with overseeing workplace safety, may mandate the vaccine or regular testing of 84 million people, or whether, as 27 states before us submit, that work belongs to state and local governments across the country and the people's elected representatives in Congress. This court is not a public health authority. Let me read that again. This court is not a public health authority, but it is charged with resolving disputes about which authorities possess the power to make the laws that govern us under the Constitution and the laws of the land, aka we need to follow the Constitution. This is Gorsuch concurring. I start with this court's precedent. There is no question that state and local authorities possess considerable power to regulate public health. They enjoy the, quote, general power of governing, end quote, including all sovereign powers envisioned by the Constitution and not specifically vested in the federal government. Now, I'm not going to go through all the statutes that they cite here. You guys can kind of read those for yourselves. But I will start, keep going through what they say. And in fact, states have pursued a variety of measures in response to the current pandemic. The federal government's powers, however, are not general, but limited and divided. Not only must the federal government properly invoke a constitutionally enumerated source of authority to regulate in this area or any other, it must also act consistently with the Constitution's separation of powers. And when it comes to that obligation, this court has established at least one firm rule, quote, we expect Congress to speak clearly, end quote, a freaking men. He didn't put that in there. I did. If it wishes to assign to an executive agency decisions, quote, of vast economic and political significance, end quote. We sometimes call this the major questions doctrine. OSHA's mandate fails that doctrine's test. The agency claims the power to force 84 million Americans to receive a vaccine or undergo regular testing. By any measure, that is a claim of power to resolve a question of vast national significance. Yet Congress has nowhere clearly assigned so much power to OSHA. Approximately 2 years have passed since the pandemic began. Vaccines have been available for more than a year. Over that span, Congress has adopted several major pieces of legislation aimed at combating COVID-19. But Congress has chosen not to afford OSHA or any federal agency the authority to issue a vaccine mandate. Indeed, a majority of the Senate even voted to disapprove OSHA's regulations. It seems, too, that the agency pursued its regulatory initiative only as a legislative workaround. God, amen. Far less consequential agency rules have run afoul of the major questions doctrine. It is hard to see this one does not. What is OSHA's reply? It directs us to 29 U.S. Constitution Statute 655 sub C sub 1. In that statute subsection, Congress authorized OSHA to issue emergency regulations upon determining that, quote, employees are exposed to grave danger from exposure to substances or agents determined to be toxic or physically harmful, end quote. And that, quote, such emergency standards are necessary to protect employees from such dangers, end quote. According to the agency, this provision supplies it with, quote, almost unlimited discretion, end quote, to mandate new nationwide rules in response to the pandemic, so long as those rules are reasonably related to workplace safety. The court rightly applies the major questions doctrine and concludes that this lone statutory subsection does not clearly authorize OSHA's mandate. Man, do you guys see how like thin razor margins we're working on here? Because it wasn't filed potentially under the proper state or proper statute and subsection of the statute, that OSHA didn't get accepted. I mean, that's not the full decision here, but that's a portion of the decision. I mean, we're working on razor thin margins here on determining what the Constitution does and does not say for these people. It's unreal, and it's all in how it's filed. That's why they're trying to get all these court cases dismissed on procedural motions and how they're filed. It's just nuts. The court rightly applies the major. I already read that part. Since then, OSHA has relied on it to issue only comparatively modest rules addressing dangers uniquely prevalent inside the workplace, like asbestos and rare chemicals. This is Gorsuch's dissent. I don't want to go through that one. That one's very similar to the previous one. And then I want to read Thomas's dissent here at the bottom. Here we go. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not. I thought so. Thomas's, I guess, is on the federal workers one, which is right here. So I want to read the Breyer, Sotomayor, and the Justice Kagan dissenting. So I'm going to go now to the dissents and skipping over that last concurrence. So this is Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan's dissent. Every day, COVID-19 poses great. Can you guys see that? Here, maybe I'll blow it up a little bit more. Is that better? Yeah, you guys can see that maybe a little bit better. Every day, COVID-19 poses grave dangers to the citizens of this country, and particularly to its workers. The disease has by now killed almost 1 million Americans and hospitalized almost 4 million. It spreads by person-to-person contact in confirmed indoor spaces, so causes harm in nearly all workplace environments. And in those environments, more than any others, individuals have little control and therefore little capacity to mitigate risk. COVID-19, in short, is a menace in work settings. The proof is all around us. Since the disease's onset, most Americans have seen their workplaces transformed. So the administrative agency charged with ensuring health and safety in workplaces did what Congress commanded it to do. It took action to address COVID-19's continuing threat in those spaces. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration issued an emergency temporary standard requiring either vaccination or masking and testing to protect American workers. The standard falls within the core of the agency's mission, quote, to protect employees from grave danger that comes from the new hazards of exposure to harmful agents. OSHA estimates, and there is no ground for disputing, that the standard will save over 6,500 lives and prevent over 250,000 hospitalizations in 6 months' time. Yet today, the court issues a stay that prevents the standard from taking effect. In our view, the court's order seriously misapplies the applicable legal standards. And in doing so, it stymies the federal government's ability to counter the unparalleled threat that COVID-19 poses to our nation's workers. Acting outside of its, what they're not saying is that it's still optional. You still have an option. Everybody has the option to get the vaccine if they want. It's a personal health decision. We're not looking for the federal government's ability to counter the unparalleled threat that COVID-19 is. We're looking for individuals to make that decision. These people. Acting outside of its competence and without legal basis, the court displaces the judgments of the government's officials given the responsibility to respond to workplace health emergencies. We respectfully dissent. Well, good thing it's not in the hands of the government officials to give us responsible workplace health emergency initiatives. We have the ability to make our own decisions in that regard. So thank you very much. And then it goes into kind of some history of the OSHA's requirements and what they make, the determinations that they make. And then I'll skip down here to the last paragraph because I think it's really important to kind of give that context in, I'll do the last couple of paragraphs because they're actually pretty good for context. All right. So here's the last two paragraphs, or last three. Underlying everything else in this dispute is a single simple question. Who decides how much protection and of what kind American workers need from COVID-19? That's exactly what they said in their concurrence, except you're looking for the federal government to make that decisions, and the Constitution is looking for individuals to make that decision. An agency with expertise in workplace health and safety, acting as Congress and the president authorized, or a court lacking any knowledge of how to safeguard workplaces and insulated from responsibility for any damage it causes. Here, an agency charged by Congress with safeguarding employees from workplace dangers has decided that action is needed. The agency has thoroughly evaluated the risks that the disease poses to workers across all sectors of the economy. It has considered the extent to which various policies will mitigate those risks and the costs those policies will entail. It has landed on an approach that encourages vaccination, but allows employers to use masking and testing instead. It has meticulously explained why it has reached its conclusions. And in doing all this, it has acted within the four corners of its statutory authorization, or actually here, its statutory mandate. OSHA, that is, has responded in the way necessary to alleviate the, quote, grave danger, end quote, that workplace exposure to the, quote, new hazard, end quote, of COVID-19 possesses to employees across the nation. The agency's standard is informed by half a century of experience and expertise in handling workplace health and safety issues. And the standard also has the virtue of political accountability, for OSHA is responsible to the president, and the president is responsible to and can be held to account by the American public. Yeah, I'd like to say a couple comments about that. We've been trying to hold a lot of these people accountable. And where have the federal agencies stepped in or overstepped their boundaries? In the FBI, the DOJ, the DOD, the Occupational Safety Hazard Administration. I don't even want to hear that from you dissenters there on the Supreme Court. Thank you very much. And then there is this court. Its members are elected by and accountable to no one. And we, quote, lack the background, competence, and expertise to assess, end quote, workplace health and safety issues. When we are wise, we know enough to we know enough to defer on matters like this one. When we are wise, we know not to displace the judgments of experts, acting within the sphere Congress marked out and under presidential control to deal with emergency conditions. Today, we are not wise. In the face of a still raging pandemic, this court tells the agency charged with protecting worker safety that it may not do so in all workplaces needed. No, it's not that they can't tell them to do that, because businesses have the option to do that if they'd like. It's saying you can't mandate that for the entire country if they so choose they don't want to do it under their own volition, which is what the Constitution allows free Americans to make their own personal decisions in. God, these people, they bastardize the Constitution by saying, well, we have the power to mandate anything that we feel the Constitution says it has the ability to mandate. And they don't. It's a personal decision given to us by our Creator, by the way. As disease and death continue to mount, this court tells the agency that it cannot respond in the most effective way possible. Without legal basis, the court usurps a decision that rightfully belongs to others. It undercuts the capacity of the responsible federal officials acting well within the scope of their authority to protect American workers from grave danger. So those are the two concurrents and dissents on the workplaces with 100 employees or more. That's out on a 6-3 decision. The 5-4 decision, however, from now healthcare workers being able to be mandated vaccines was a 5-4 decision in favor of that mandate. And I believe it was Kavanaugh and, the dissenters here are Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Barrett. And I want to read this dissent to you because I think this is important as well. 2 months ago, the Department of Health and Human Services, acting through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, issued, it was Kavanaugh and Roberts that sided with the libs, issued an omnibus rule mandating that medical facilities nationwide order their employees, volunteers, contractors, and other workers to receive a COVID vaccine. Covered employers must fire non-compliant workers or risk fines and termination of their Medicare and Medicaid provider agreements. As a result, the government has effectively mandated vaccination for 10 million healthcare workers. 2 district courts preliminarily enjoined enforcement of the omnibus rule, and the government now requests an emergency stay of those injunctions pending appeal. Because the government has not made a strong showing that it has statutory authority to issue the rule, I too would deny a stay. To obtain a stay, the government must show, this is, by the way, Thomas writing this dissent, Justice Thomas. To obey the stay, the government must show that there is, 1, a reasonable probability that we would grant certiorari, and 2, a fair prospect that we would reverse the judgments below, and 3, a likelihood that irreparable harm will result from denying a stay. Because there is no real dispute that this case merits our review, our decision turns primarily on whether the government can make a strong showing that it is likely to succeed on the merits. In my view, the government has not made such a showing here. The government begins by invoking 2 statutory provisions that generally grant CMS authority to promulgate rules to implement Medicare and Medicaid. The first authorizes CMS to, quote, publish such rules and regulations as may be necessary to the efficient administration of the agency's functions. The second authorizes CMS to, quote, prescribe such regulations as may be necessary to carry out the administration of the insurance programs, end quote, under the Medicare Act. The government has not established that either provision empowers it to impose a vaccine mandate. Rules carrying out the, quote, administration, end quote, of Medicare and Medicaid are those that serve, quote, the practical management and direction, end quote, of those programs. Black's Law Dictionary 58, such rules are, quote, necessary, end quote, to, quote, administration, end quote, if they hear an actual and discernible nexus to the program's practical management. Here, the omnibus rule compels millions of healthcare workers to undergo an unwanted medical procedure that cannot be removed at the end of the shift. To the extent the rule has any connection to the management of Medicare and Medicaid, it is at most a tangential one. At oral argument, the government largely conceded that this statute with the subsections listed here alone do not authorize the omnibus rule. Instead, it fell back on a constellation of statutory provisions that each concern one of the 15 types of medical facilities that the rule covers. The government, I'm going to skip down here to the next paragraph. The government has not made a strong showing that this agglomeration of statutes authorizes any such rule. Going on down, next, the government identifies 8 definitional provisions describing, for example, what makes a hospital, quote, a hospital. These define covered facilities as those that comply with a variety of conditions, including such other requirements as the Secretary finds necessary in the interest of health and safety. Regulations, skipping down here to the next paragraph. The government has not made a strong showing that this hodgepodge of provisions authorizes a nationwide vaccine mandate. We presume that Congress does not hide fundamental details of a regulatory scheme in vague or ancillary provisions. Yet here, the government proposes to find virtually unlimited vaccination power over millions of healthcare workers in definitional provisions, a saving clause, and a provision regarding long-term care facilities sanitation procedures. The government has not explained why Congress would have used these ancillary provisions to house what can only be characterized as a fundamental detail of the statutory scheme. Had Congress wanted to grant CMS power to impose a vaccine mandate across all facility types, it would have done what it has done elsewhere, specifically authorize one. Nonetheless, even if I were to accept that Congress could have hidden vaccine mandate power in statutory definitions, I love Thomas, the language in these health and safety provisions does not suggest that Congress did so. Take, for example, 42 subsection or statute 1395, subsection E, which defines hospital for certain purposes. 3 subsections define hospitals as providers of specific patient services. And 5 describe administrative requirements that a facility must meet to qualify as a covered hospital. The final subsection then provides that a hospital must also meet such other requirements as the Secretary finds necessary in the interest of the health and safety of individuals who are furnished services. Contrary to the government's position, this kind of catch-all provision does not authorize every regulation related to health and safety. As with all statutory language, context must inform the scope of that provision. Let's skip on down here to the next paragraph. Only one facility-specific provision is arguably different. It regulates long-term care facilities and mandates an infection control program among its health and safety provisions. But that infection control program provision focuses on sanitizing the facility's environment, not its personnel. Amen. In any event, even if the statutory language justified a vaccine mandate in long-term care facilities, it could not sustain the omnibus rule. Neither the infection control language nor a reasonable analog appears in any of the other facility-specific provisions. Basic interpretive principles would thus suggest that CMS lacks vaccine mandatory authority with respect to the other types of facilities. Skipping on down to the next paragraph. For its part, the court does not rely on the government's preferred statutory provisions. Instead, it asserts that CMS possesses broad vaccine mandating authority by pointing to a handful of CMS regulations. To begin, the court does not explain why the bare existence of these regulations is evidence of what Congress empowered the agency to do. Relying on them appears to put the cart before the horse. Regardless, these regulations provide scant support for the sweeping power the government now claims. Going on. The court also invokes a regulation requiring hospitals to implement programs that, quote, govern the surveillance, prevention, and control of infectious diseases, end quote, as well as a few regulations that require infection and prevention control programs as some facility types. But many of these infection control regulations, like the infection control program set out at this referenced point here, are far afield from immunization. See, that's what they don't get. This is so much a invasion. Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate that. This is so much an invasion of personal body autonomy. This is not like, we're not talking about regulations on sanitizing buildings. We're talking about injecting an irreplaceable chemical into someone's body. I'm glad that he's saying what he's saying, even if it is a 5-4 decision the other way. Finally, our precedents confirm that the government has failed to make a strong showing on its merits. And by the way, to Stacy's point, I think all of us are making the difference, and I really want to thank you, Stacy, for that support. But I would be incredibly remiss if I didn't say that everybody on this thread now, everybody who's going to be watching this video later, everybody who cares enough to follow this type of coverage isn't making the difference. Like, I understand we're tired. I understand that there is a lot of justice that we have yet to see come to fruition. I have felt it tenfold in doing these podcasts on a daily basis. But the fact that we're still here, the fact that you guys care enough to be on a thread where I'm reading a dissent from a decision that didn't even go the way that the Constitution should say that it should go, means that you guys are involved, you're engaged, you care. A lot of you are probably going to be active in your local elections coming up in the future, hopefully 2022 and then beyond. This is why we do these podcasts. This is why I have a podcast. It's for people like Stacy. It's for people like you out there who continue to show the initiative, who continue to have passion for our Constitution, for our freedom. And I know it sounds like very cliche to say that, but guys, this is a daily struggle. At a certain point, I feel like it's almost an hourly struggle. Doesn't it feel like that? It feels like at times this is just like one punch to the gut after another. But when you see victories, at least in the small portion, you have to celebrate those. You have to give yourself a win, because you cannot continue to beat yourself into the ground on the things that aren't happening. These wins are important, and we have to continue to focus on those, and then continue to fight for the Constitution in the areas that in which we're not winning. So, Stacey, thank you for pointing that out and bringing it to a larger scope of it's not just me, it's everybody involved. And I really want to thank you guys for being here. You guys mean the world to me. You know that. So I'm going to continue on. Finally, our precedents confirm that the government has failed to make strong showings on its merits. We expect Congress to speak clearly when authorizing an agency to exercise powers of vast economic and political significance. Amen. That's it. Separation of powers. The states have the power, and people have the ability to make their own decisions. We expect Congress to use, quote, exceedingly clear language if it wishes to significantly alter the balance between state and federal powers. Amen. The omnibus rule is undoubtedly significant. It requires millions of healthcare workers to choose between losing their livelihoods and acquiescing to a vaccine that they have rejected for months. Vaccine mandates also fall squarely within a state's police power, and until now, only rarely have been a tool of the federal government. If Congress had wanted to grant CMS authority to impose a nationwide vaccine mandate and consequently alter the state-federal balance, it would have done so clearly. It did not. These cases are not about the efficacy. Here, I'll zoom this in so you guys can see a little better. These cases are not about the efficacy or importance of COVID vaccines. They are only about whether CMS has the statutory authority to force healthcare workers by coercing their employers to undergo a medical procedure they do not want and cannot undo. Because the government has not made a strong showing that Congress gave CMS that broad authority, I would deny the stay pending appeal, and I, Justice Thomas, respectfully dissent. So, what are we at? 32 minutes in. I'm going to get to these next things pretty quickly because I want to keep this under an hour. That's a huge win. All right. We need to take that win, not with the healthcare workers. Obviously, you guys need to make the decision that's right for you and your family and your health and the future of where you guys want to be. And we'll see what happens there because that is an industry that is desperate for people that have experience, that is desperate for people who want people to stick around. And if you're going to continue to make these decisions based off of what you feel is a necessary procedure for everybody involved, then people have their choices to make. And I pray that you guys make the decisions that's right for you and your family, whether it's to take it or whether it's not to take it. That's up to you. And I encourage you in your decision. I know you put in countless hours to keep us updated. Listen, Stacey, thank you for all your support. Really, there's a lot of time that is put into this, especially my content that with the edited videos. They do take a lot longer than they probably should, but I want to make them so important that I'm not delivering dis or misinformation to you guys, and then making them entertaining as well, so that you can kind of share them out to other people who may not see them. But no, I really appreciate that. I think, like I said, we're all doing this, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you guys. I mean, that's why I haven't come over to YouTube as much recently, because I want to keep this channel desperately. I want to keep this channel. And if I talk about anything that's remotely what YouTube doesn't want you to talk about, you're gone. I mean, Neil Johnson just got struck yesterday, and he's appealing, but I think he's out for another week. I mean, he's been like changing his entire way that he tells stories and talks about the news because he doesn't want to get struck. And then they strike him anyway, saying misinformation about a specific year. You're never going to win. And so you have to unfortunately go to other platforms right now. And that's going to change in the future. But for right now, that's where we're at. And so I really appreciate you looking out, Stacey. You're my people. And then Scott, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that, man. Your guys' support is the only way I'm going to be able to continue this. Like I said, there might be a job opportunity in the future coming up. I'm not really sure just yet what's going on with that. We're still working out the details if it's going to happen or not. A lot of factors that go into it. I can't go into the details with you guys now, but Just know that this has been my number one priority for a very long time. I've wanted to be a truth sayer for a very long time. I feel like God has opened the doors to allow me to do that. And here I am talking to you guys about Supreme Court decisions. So, Scott, thank you very much for your support. It's the only way we can keep going. I really appreciate it. All right, let's get into the next topic here, because the filibuster will continue. Thank you, Kristen Sinema. Now, this is a rather lengthy speech that she gives on the Senate floor, but I want to play the entirety of it because I think it's incredibly important what she says and to give context to what she says. So again, it's about 19 minutes long. If you don't want to stick around for the whole thing, you don't have to, or you can fast forward to the next part. But again, this is, I'm going to remove this here and share the screen over here. I mean, this is, the filibuster is a, this is a massive win for anybody who wants the limited scope of government, right? You're not going to have one party get rid of the filibuster and then just ram through whatever laws that I can't talk about on here they want to ram through. And I got a quote from Biden about that after this, but I'm going to add this here, and then I'm going to play this for you in its entirety. So here, let's do this.
Women.
All right, let's go back to the beginning here.
In real,
can you guys hear that?
Ways. These deepening divisions hurt our ability to work together to create new job opportunities, protect the health and safety of our communities and country, and to ensure everyday families get ahead. Americans across the country know this. They see it every day, not only on social media and cable news, but at their jobs.
This is a live broadcast when you're producing, directing, and playing video. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Here, let me reshare this. This sounds good. Okay, you can hear that. All right. So I'll start it over from the beginning. Sorry about that, guys.
Americans in real, tangible ways. These deepening divisions hurt our ability to work together to create new job opportunities, protect the health and safety of our communities and country, and to ensure everyday families get ahead. Americans across the country know this. They see it every day, not only on social media and cable news, but at their jobs and around their dinner tables. We are divided. It is more likely today that we look at other Americans who have different views and see the other, or even see them as enemies, instead of as fellow countrymen and women who share our core values. It's more common today to demonize someone who thinks differently than us, rather than to seek to understand their views. Our politics reflect and exacerbate these divisions, making it more and more difficult to find lasting, broadly supported solutions to safeguard our freedoms, keep our country safe, and expand opportunity for all our citizens. So 2 questions face us as a nation. Where does this descending spiral of division lead? And how can we stop it? Our country's divisions have now fueled efforts in several states that will make it more difficult for Americans to vote and undermine faith that all Americans should have in our elections and our democracy. These state laws have no place in a nation whose government is formed by free, fair, and open elections. We must also acknowledge a painful fact. The state laws we seek to address are symptoms of a larger, more deeply rooted problem facing our democracy. The divisions themselves, which have hardened in recent years and have combined with rampant disinformation to push too many Americans away from our basic constitutional values. In the spring of 2017, after Trump took office, I wrote an opinion piece in the Arizona Republic highlighting my concerns about the strains on our constitutional boundaries and the shrinking respect for our founding constitutional principles. In the years that followed, my colleagues and I in this body were called upon to participate in 2 separate impeachment trials for crimes against our Constitution. And on January 6th last year, I was standing in this very spot, speaking in this very chamber, defending Arizona's fair and valid election against disinformation when violent insurrectionists halted the presidential certification. Threats to American democracy are real. I share the concerns of civil rights advocates and others I've heard from in recent months about these state laws. I strongly support those efforts to contest these laws in court and to invest significant resources into these states to better organize and stop efforts to restrict access at the ballot box. And I strongly support and will continue to vote for legislative responses to address these state laws, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that the Senate is currently considering. I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community. These bills help treat the symptoms of the disease, but they do not fully address the disease itself. And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country. The debate over the Senate's 60-vote threshold shines a light on our broader challenges. There's no need for me to restate my long-standing support for the 60-vote threshold to pass legislation. There's no need for me to restate its role protecting our country from wild reversals in federal policy. It is a view I've held during my years serving in both the US House and the Senate, and it is the view I continue to hold. It is the belief that I have shared many times in public settings and in private settings. Senators of both parties have offered ideas, including some that would earn my support, to make this body more productive, more deliberative, more responsive to Americans' needs, and a place of genuine debate about our country's pressing issues. And while this week's harried discussions about Senate rules are but a poor substitute for what I believe could have and should have been a thoughtful public debate at any time over the past year, such a discussion is still a worthy goal. But a discussion of rules falls short of what is required. American politics are cyclical, and the granting of power in Washington, D.C. is exchanged regularly by the voters from one party to another. This shift of power back and forth means the Senate 60 vote threshold has proved maddening to members of both political parties in recent years, viewed either as a weapon of obstruction or a safety net to save the country from radical policies, depending on whether you serve in the majority or the minority. But what is the legislative filibuster other than a tool that requires new federal policy to be broadly supported by senators representing a broader cross-section of Americans, a guardrail, inevitably viewed as an obstacle by whoever holds the Senate majority, but which in reality ensures that millions of Americans represented by the minority party have a voice in the process. Demands to eliminate this threshold from whichever party holds the fleeting majority amount to a group of people separated on two sides of a canyon, shouting that solution to their colleagues. And that makes the rift both wider and deeper. Consider this. In recent years, nearly every party line response to the problems we face in this body, every partisan action taken to protect a cherished value, has led us to more division, not less. The impact is clear for all to see. The steady escalation of tit for tat, in which each new majority weakens the guardrails of the Senate and excludes input from the other party, furthering resentment and anger amongst this body and our constituents at home. Democrats' increased use of requiring cloture for judicial nominees under President George W. Bush led to similar tactics by Republicans under President Barack Obama. The 2013 decision by Senate Democrats to eliminate the 60-vote threshold for most judicial and presidential nominations led directly to a response in 2017 by Senate Republicans, who eliminated the threshold for Supreme Court nominees. These short-sighted actions by both parties have led to our current American judiciary and Supreme Court, which, as I stand here today, is considering questions regarding fundamental rights Americans have enjoyed for decades. Eliminating the 60-vote threshold on a party line with the thinnest of possible majorities to pass these bills that I support will not guarantee that we prevent demagogues from winning office. Indeed, some who undermine the principles of democracy have already been elected. Rather, eliminating the 60-vote threshold will simply guarantee that we lose a critical tool that we need to safeguard our democracy from threats in the years to come. It is clear that the two-party strategies are not working, not for either side, and especially not for the country. Now, it's comfortable for members of each party, particularly those who spent their career in party politics, to think that their respective party alone can move the country forward. Party control becomes a goal in and of itself, instead of prioritizing a healthy, appropriate balance in which Americans' diverse views and shared values are represented. But when one party need only negotiate with itself, policy will inextricably be pushed from the middle towards the extremes. And I understand there are some on both sides of the aisle that prefer that outcome, but I do not. And I know that Arizonans do not either. Our country's first president, George Washington, a leader whose wisdom I borrowed at the conclusion of the 2020 impeachment trial, he warned against political factions more than 200 years ago, saying that extreme partisanship could lead to the ruins of public liberty. I was no party man myself, Washington wrote, and the first wish of my heart was, if parties did exist, to reconcile them. Today, we serve in an equally divided Senate, and today marks the longest time in history that the Senate has been equally divided. The House of Representatives is nearly equally divided as well. Our mandate? It seems evident to me. Work together and get stuff done for America. And the past years have shown when a party in control pushes party line changes exceeding their electoral mandate, the bitterness within our politics is exacerbated. Tensions are raised within the country, and traditionally, nonpartisan issues are transformed into partisan wedges. We must address the disease itself, the disease of division, to protect our democracy. And it cannot be achieved by one party alone. It cannot be achieved solely by the federal government. The response requires something greater and, yes, more difficult than what the Senate is discussing today. We need robust, sustained strategies that put aside party labels and focus on our democracy, because these challenges are bigger than party affiliation. We must commit to a long-term approach as serious as the problems we seek to solve, one that prioritizes listening and understanding, one that embraces making progress on shared priorities and finding common ground on issues where we hold differing and diverse views. This work requires all Americans everywhere. Efforts to fix these problems on a bare majority party line will only succeed in exacerbating the root causes that gave way to these state laws in the first place, extending our descent into a more fragmented America. This work is our shared responsibility as Americans. I share the disappointment of many that we've not found more support on the other side of the aisle for legislative responses to state-level voting restrictions. I wish that were not the case. Just as I wish there had been a more serious effort on the part of Democratic Party leaders to sit down with the other party and genuinely discuss how to reforge common ground on these issues. My Republican colleagues have a duty to meet their shared responsibility to protect access to voting and the integrity of our electoral process. We need a sustained, robust effort to defend American democracy, an effort on the part of Democrats, Republicans, independents, and all Americans in communities across this country. So we ask, what must we do to protect our democracy? We should invest heavily in recruiting and supporting state and local candidates for office in both parties who represent the values enshrined in our Constitution. We should ensure we have a judiciary that is less lopsided in its political leanings and that we can all depend on to uphold the Constitution. We must confront and combat the rise of rampant disinformation and ensure that all Americans have the tools to see fact from fiction. This will be particularly difficult work, since some in power have used disinformation to manipulate our differences and pull Americans apart, pressuring us to see our fellow Americans as enemies. The dangers facing our democracy took years to metastasize, and they will take years of sustained, focused effort to effectively reverse. There are steps that we can take today to fix our politics and better set the stage for repairing our democracy. Many of you know I began my career as a social worker. And in our social work training, our first necessary skill is the ability to listen to others. Listening not to argue or rebut, but listening to understand. I ran for the United States Senate rejecting partisanship, willing to work with anyone to help Arizonans build better and more secure lives. And throughout my time serving Arizona, I have listened to Arizonans expressing diverse views on inflation, economic competitiveness, climate, and social priorities, and the role of the federal government itself. I find myself grateful time and time again to learn from Arizonans who share the same core values, but differ in position on issues and policies. Their similarities and their differences are surely representative of the complexity of Americans nationwide. So I find this question answers itself. Can two Americans of sharp intellect and good faith reach different conclusions to the same question? Yes. Yes, of course they can. It is easy for elected officials to give speeches about what they believe. It is harder to listen and acknowledge that there are a whole lot of Americans with different ideas about what is important in our country and how to solve those problems. And yet, it is important to recognize that disagreements are okay. They're normal. And honest disagreements, matched with a willingness to listen and learn, can help us forge sturdy and enduring solutions. You know, Congress was designed to bring together Americans of diverse views, representing different interests, and as a collective, to find compromise and common ground to serve our country as a whole. We face serious challenges, and meeting them must start with a willingness to be honest, to listen to one another, to lower the political temperature, and to seek lasting solutions. Some have given up on the goal of easing our divisions and uniting Americans. I have not. I've worked hard to demonstrate in my public service the value of working with unlikely allies to get results, helping others see our common humanity and finding our common ground. And I remain stubbornly optimistic because this is America. We have overcome every challenge we've ever faced. And I am committed to doing my part to avoid toxic political rhetoric, to build bridges, to forge common ground, and to achieve lasting results for Arizona and this country. But we are in desperate need of more. More people who are willing to listen, to seek understanding, to stitch together the fabric of our country that has been ripping around the edges. More people who are willing to put down the sticks sharpened for battle and instead pick up their neighbors to learn why they're angry or upset or left behind. So I call on each of us as Americans, let us be those people. We are but one country. We have but one democracy. We can only survive. We can only keep her if we do so together. Thank you.
Thank you guys for keeping that, allowing me to keep that perspective of the whole entire speech. I know it was lengthy and there was a lot in there, but I wanted to bring the entire speech for context. And obviously a ton of points in there that we can obviously agree with, disagree with. There was so much in there, right, packed within that 19 minutes. But she did mention one thing that I was just really strongly felt that this is something we need to highlight. And she said it cannot be achieved by one party alone, and it cannot be achieved by the federal government. Well, that's for damn sure it can't be achieved by the federal government. But I don't think that it's not going to work if we don't come together. So I think the sentiment of what she's saying is correct. All the ancillary evidence around that, you know, there's a ton of junk in there that she was talking about. But I do agree that the temperature is too hot, and Christ alone can be the only one who saves us on this journey that we're on. And you want to know why the temperature is so hot? It's because of certain things that are said like this today from Joseph Biden. It's so rampant. I mean, there's a ton of things of why the temperature is so hot right now and things that I can't go into on this platform. But just listen to what he says here. I mean, just look at what he's saying in this piece right here.
Unfortunately, while our military is stepping up, as they always do, there are others sitting on the sidelines, and we're standing in the way. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it. Personal choice impacts us all, our hospitals, our countries. I make a special appeal to social media companies and media outlets. Please deal with the misinformation and disinformation that's on your shows. It has to stop. COVID-19 is one of the most formidable enemies America has ever faced. We've got to work together, not against each other.
I mean, calling on social media companies to stop mis and disinformation, which is also what Kristen Sinema talked about, is tyrannical. I mean, you're asking these platforms to become publishers and to censor anybody's information that you don't like. Whether it is the problem is to some people, what someone's misinformation is somebody else's information. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. There's truth being sought on all levels. That's why we started this podcast. I wanted to bring the truth. The truth to a lot of people is relative, and it shouldn't be, because there are absolutes and there are circumstantials and all these other aspects that bring the truth to a full circle. But there's so much evil that we're facing in that regard that we can't just say, oh yeah, just censor those that are bringing the information that you don't want to hear. That's asinine. That's beyond asinine. That's evil is what it is. And we're going to call it out for what it is. So this was, that's part of the division, small portion of all the division that has been brought by this stinking administration. But there is another portion of what he said. He reacted to the decision to keep the filibuster. And I think this is very telling, and I wanted to bring this to you as well. So lay your eyes on this comment right here.
Subjects like, can you get this done? I hope we can get this done. We all ask questions about complicated subjects like, can you get this done? I hope we can get this done. The honest to God answer is, I don't know whether we can get this done. Is this mic on? I guess, anyway. And I'm not sure either. But anyway, I hope we can get this done. But I'm not sure. But one thing for certain, like every other major civil rights bill that came along, if we missed the first time, we could come back and try it a second time. We missed this time. And the state legislative bodies continue to change the law, not as to who can vote, but who gets to count the vote. Count the vote. Count the vote. It's about election subversion, not just whether or not people get to vote. Who counts the vote? That's what this is about. That's what makes this so different than anything else we've ever done. I don't know that we can get it done, but I know one thing. As long as I have a breath in me, as long as I'm in the White House, as long as I'm engaged at all, I'm going to be fighting to change the way these legislatures have moving. Thank you.
I want to say so many things. I'll say this. They project. They give strategies and project it onto their opposition, if you know what I mean. So that's where I'm going to go with that. I'm not going to go any deeper into that. I'm sure I'll probably get struck for even playing the stinking clip, even though it was CNN YouTube, by the way. That was CNN. You can't strike me for one of your approved networks playing a clip from them. I do love their exposure, though. They expose themselves all the time, don't they? By projecting. No one is above the law. It's about who counts the votes, all that stuff. We're onto their game. We've been onto it for a long time, but they continue to go down and play these political games that they think are strategically winning, and they're like living. It's like that guy who still wears his Letterman's jacket when you go back to your hometown. He still thinks he's the star running back, even though it's like been 10 years since he graduated high school. He still wears it. It's that guy. They just continue to play these old school style politics that think are winning. And what I wanted to cap this off on, I know I said I keep it under an hour. I want to cap this last thing off on the approval rating. It's abysmal. 33 freaking % is the approval rating for this administration. And that's according here to a Quinnipiac poll. 53% disapproving. I don't know if you can get lower than 33%, to be honest with you, because there's always going to be 30% of people that are just going to blindly follow and say, yes, whatever my side says is the truth. But look at this, 34% on the economy, 35% on foreign policy, which should be way lower, and 39% on COVID, which should be much lower as well. If this were a Trump Quinnipiac poll and this was his approval rating, you would see this on every headline story, on every major news network for the next 3 days. That's what you would see. But because it's not, you've got citizen journalists like exposure.com bringing it to you at 3:44 Central Time in the afternoon on a Thursday. I mean, it's unreal. They're going to ignore this all the way. And why is it? Why is it that way? Well, because we've got inflation at an all-time high, at a 40-year high since the 80s. I had a little thing on that. I'm trying to find it as we're talking here, but since 1982, highest inflation since then. Everything is 7% higher. There it is, right there. Look at this. Check this out. Gas prices up almost 50%. Used cars and trucks, which I've got to get here pretty soon. 37%. Not a great time to buy a used car, but I need to do it. Bacon You ever notice that? I went to the store the other day. I'm serious. Bacon was like, I think it was $9 for a pound. And the good stuff was like $12 for a pound of bacon. GTFO, man. Shoes are up 6%. Chicken, that's a big one. Chicken's up 10%. So this is just one of the incredibly many reasons of why Quinnipiac has them at the American people have them at 33%. There's so many more things we want to talk about. Obviously, go over to Locals. We talk about it there. We do lives here because I miss you guys, because I want to bring you the information that you should have. But there's just things that we could correlate this to that we can't over here on this platform. So I'm going to end this with that 33% in the toilet, man. I miss you guys a lot over here on YouTube. I will be over here more often. Like I said, I've got some things kind of coming up on the hopper. I'll keep you updated on. I'm not really sure what the defining factor is going to be, but I know the Lord is working in my heart and in my family's life and trying to move us into positions that He wants us to be in. And so, guys, if you can, pray for me. Pray for discernment and making the right decisions. Pray for provision that we do the Lord's will and not our will, because that's all that matters, is doing His will. And there's nothing else in this world that matters. So when you're in His will, you're in the perfect spot anyway. So I love you guys. I'll see you in the next one. And if you work in a company that's private and over 100 people, enjoy that freedom, baby. Finally, you get a win. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.